Hey guys, welcome back. Lately I've been trying out some Dread Elf lists with 2 units of 10 Dread Knights, and this is a continuation of this. So I'm not really set on the list by this point in time yet, but I'm converging to something that seems to be quite okay. So this was the previous iteration that I tried, and it has the Dread Prince on the Pegasus with the Midnight Cloak and Transcendence. There's an Oracle on Alchemy with the Wizard Master, with Destiny's Call Moriarty's Reaping, which is a really good setup for this model because you end up with 4 attacks with high offensive still, lightning reflexes, strength 4, +1 to wound, and AP 3 with rerolls of 1s to wound. So that's really good on a wizard. Then we have a Captain BSB with Fleet Commander to get Vanguard for 1 unit of Corsairs, and you can join them to also benefit from the Vanguard. Also on the Pegasus. And then in core we have the aforementioned Corsairs with Vanguard and a Flaming Standard because it pairs really well with Alchemy on the Wizardmaster. The rest of the core I filled up still with some units of Dread Legionnaires because I was concerned about the flexibility of the list in terms of movement. But right now I'm thinking that maybe it's better to just run it as a really aggressive aggro list. So you don't really need this flexibility of movement. That might even be better to just have one big block of Legionnaires with a Relentless Company banner, just to march up turn 1 and put it in your opponent's face, basically. Then we have the 2 units of Dread Knights together with the Divine Altar. I think the Divine Altar is really necessary in this type of list because it really ramps up the damage output of the Dread Knights. And it makes them not really needing the charge. Because if you charge in whilst it is within range of the Divine Altar, you're first going to face 11 attacks at strength 4 with +1 to wound with a reroll of the 1s to wound. So against anything with resilience 3 or even 4, that is really going to be tough for your opponent. And then the cold ones, they actually also benefit from the +1 to wound of the Divine Altar, so they also effectively strike at strength 5. Yeah, and then some Harpies and a Medusa for chaff. Yeah, I also don't really know if that is really needed in an offensive list like this, but we'll see how it happens on the battlefield. And then my opponent has Undying Dynasties. So he's been tooling around with it a little bit, and this time he took a bit of an approach where you approach the character section of Undying Dynasties as an empire kind of section, where you have a lot of small heroes that each have a small role to fulfill in the army. So yeah, first off you have the general, who's just the general basically, and he has the Crown of Pharaohs to give some other unit +2 offensive defensive, I think, something like that. Then you have the 2 wizards, so a Wizard Master and a Wizard Adept, mostly on the augment spells. You have the Pharaoh, so this Pharaoh is 470 points, but he's insane for what he costs. Because he has 4 attacks or 5 attacks that are at strength 7, I believe, with D3 wounds if you have any type of Aegis save, and also divine attacks. And then himself, he has 4 wounds at resilience 5, with still a 4 Obama save and a 4 Aegis, I believe. So in the end, he's quite tough still, because also he still has offensive, defensive 6 and such. So it's a tough model to shift around. Yeah, I don't know why you don't see this guy just as a cowboy more often, because he's only 470 points, so that's not even that expensive, whilst he competes against models out there that are like 600 to 800 points. Then we have a Tomb Harbinger BSB. Yeah, this is also a good setup. So paired weapons and Scourge of Kings gets him to 7 attacks. And if he's in a unit of Necropolis Guard, I don't think they benefit each other. I think it's just him that gives the bonuses to the Necropolis Guard. But you end up with a model with Lethal Strike, with Battle Focus, with Poison, with reroll to hit if, 3 magic, strength 4. So yeah, that's really good. Like 7 attacks. Battle focus reroll to hit, so you're gonna get more than 7 hits most likely with poison already, and then lethal strike. Yeah. So this model has kind of the similar damage output as the unit itself. So he really ramps up the capabilities of the unit. Now the other Tomb Harbinger is not that exciting. We just have Yammer and his shield, but he still gives his unit a stubborn just like the other one does. So turning it basically from a kind of flimsy unit into a reliable block. Yeah, what else? For core, we have the Skeleton Archers. That's going to be the bunker for the mages. We have the Skeleton Chariots that are going to be used to zone out your opponent. Necropolis Guard, just to do the actual work. Probably the Colossus to mow down some infantry. Charnel Catapult to always hit on the 5+. And this thing is exceptionally good against something that is flying and doesn't have any kind of Aegis save, such as, say, BSB on a Pegasus. And the Sand Scorpion just to chaff. So we are playing Frontline Clash, and I must say that I forgot the secondary objective that we played. Could have been that we didn't play any at all. So I'll just keep that in mind for the rest of the game. I got to deploy first, and I decided to deploy my entire army just to be able to get the first turn. I don't know what my opponent would have done had I given him the opportunity to deploy first if he wanted to, but I actually think that in this scenario it was not a good thing of mine to deploy first. Just because my opponent is not going to drop his entire army first to start, because then I can easily counterplay his deployment. Because right now, as you can see, I had to space out my Golden Knights on either side of the building to account for the fact that either my opponent could still go to the left or the right. Had he already deployed everything, then I would have been able to advance way more directly to his lines. The reason that I did deploy first is mostly because of the Vanguard on the BSB Pegasus. So this denies him a shot at my model before he is able to cross the field. Then again, if my opponent had deployed before me, I could counter deploy my Pegasus in such a way that he couldn't shoot at it the first turn of the game at least. So I think actually with the matchup as I see it now back, it would have been better to just not drop everything at once. Maybe even give my opponent the first turn. Because the amount of shooting that he has, it's just the archers and it's just one catapult. It's not like he has a lot of damage output. He can't really zone out the entire table. I do have the movement advantage, and that advantage is only amplified if you get your units in the right position. So yeah, and Dying Dynasties, I hadn't realized it before, and well, nobody in my neighborhood really plays it for tournament games so far. So we're both a little bit experimenting on what works for UD and what doesn't work. So with that in mind, I also didn't realize that he would play so much in a bubble as he is playing. But he only has 12 inches for his general. So if he's gonna march with something, it's gonna march away, and yeah, it's not like Vampire Count's an army that can be really aggressive with a list like this. So you do have still some range damage output. You do have to rely on that a little bit. It's strange. Yeah. So yeah, we had the deployment. Let's get into turn 1 now. So turn 1 for the Dread Elves. I still am gonna Vanguard up my Corsairs. So my intention is to Vanguard up my Fleet Commander to a position where he can be more useful and to keep him out of charge range of the Pharaoh, of the Colossus, out of probably line of sight of the Catapult. But this puts me in a bit of an awkward position. So my opponent does zone out quite well with the Colossus there. Pharaoh and the chariots the positions where the fleet commander can land. So I am trying to just find my way around, and later I'll come back to this placement, just because it doesn't really work for me. So in the meantime, I'm just advancing some other units in a place where it doesn't really matter, just because I don't have to think about that. And then in the meantime, I do think about my Pegasus Corsair struggle. Yeah, so the fact that I deployed first resulted in the fact that my Pegasus Lord all the way on the right is just away from all the exciting stuff. So I think I definitely should have not dropped first turn immediately. So for now I settled for the deployment of my Pegasus where he is at, but my opponent still also has this the Scepter of Pharaohs or something on his general, which improves the weapons aim of one of his choices by one. So basically this would allow my opponent to use his catapult to hit on a 4+ on my Pegasus. If he hits, he's gonna wound me on a 2+, so I don't have any save against that, and he's gonna do D3+1 wounds. That's gonna hurt a lot, so it's a 50-50 first turn of the game. I don't really want to risk it. So as it is a practice game, we kind of reset where everything sort of was, and then yeah, this is the resulting picture that we get in the end. So the Corsairs with the Vanguard were able to get all the way there. Just the Vanguard is 12 inches. They have 5-inch move, but it's actually a Cult of Yama list. So my general is also Yama. So the Corsairs, they do have an extra movement in this list also. Yeah, so I settle for this. I am still within 12 inches of my Cauldron, so I do still have my 5-up Aegis, or my 6-up Aegis, I mean. Because I chose the 6-up Aegis because I thought it would be more effective this turn than anything else. And I tried to cast some magic. So I do have Word of Iron, and I do have my Hereditary. So Word of Iron is on the Corsairs to give them 2 extra armor, and the Hereditary is on the Chariots so that I have reroll to hit against them. So I wanted to also cast Glory of Gold on the Chariots, which is why the gold ones on the right had to go within 18 inches of these Chariots, which gives the Chariots actually also a charge onto my Knight. I didn't really like that idea because maybe he would even break me. I don't know if they're actually light troops or not, these Chariots. But if he is going to go into me, then I would rather have also a reroll to hit with the Knights against them than just them being flammable. Yeah, so the inevitable happens. My opponent charges in with his Chariots onto my Corsairs with the BSB. And yeah, we were both looking at this matchup and going like, oh, darn it. These Corsairs are going to have a really hard time. So my opponent did try to dispel the Word of Iron with, I believe, all his dice. I really wanted to get it off, so I used just 5 dice, I believe, even or so, just to get it off. And I did get it off, and it's really a nice spell to have against these Chariots, because Corsairs, they have a Kraken's Hide, so that increases their armor by 2 when they're on foot. They are on foot, so with the light armor that they have, they go to a 4 of armor save, which is actually one of the most resilient pieces in the Dread Elf roster, and it combines really well with the alchemy for the +2 armor. So now you're looking at a 2 of armor save unit. That is actually not that expensive per model. So yeah, if you're playing alchemy, maybe Corsairs might be just downright better than the Spear Elves. Even though the Spear Elves, they go to agility 7 when something charges them. That's also really nice. Yeah. So my opponent, he tries to advance a little bit carefully. Yeah, Undying Dynasties is not that mobile. Is what we both found out in this battle. So he has his shooting setup on the left quite nicely, and his catapult managed to land a hit on my Dread Legionnaires all the way on the left. I have to take a panic test, and they fail it, they flee away. Yeah, basically the left flank for me is just a zone that I'm just gonna ignore, basically. So with the impact hits, my opponent inflicts 4 casualties onto my Corsairs, mostly due to the 2 armor save that I had. He did get a buff spell off, but I don't remember which one actually. He does remove the rest of the Corsairs except for 1. And I do 6 wounds to the chariots. So the combined attacks of my BSB and my unit tallies up to 6 wounds. This is with the reroll to it, to wounds, sorry. So actually I stick. I didn't expect that because these 6 chariots, they are definitely scary. But then again, this BSB, once he is in combat and he gets to do his thing, he has 5 attacks, which kind of just hit, and then he has 3+2 wound with a reroll to wound in this case with AP3. So he on his own did like 3 or 4 wounds, and that really makes a difference already. But yeah, now everything is ready for the counter charge. So the Death Trance button is being pressed. The gold ones on the left, they go into the Pharaoh. The gold ones on the right, they go into the chariot. And the rest of the list is just going to advance. So, yeah, seeing how aggressive these Golden Knights are, I would be able to have moved up more aggressively even turn 1 if I wanted to, if I had not been that scared of the chariot. But I didn't do that. But if you pair your army well, if you maybe include some Dark Riders for the first charge block of your opponent, then you can play really aggressively with this army, I think. Because then either your opponent has some Dark Riders that are in the way and he's going to leave them there, allowing you to charge them away, hopefully on the second turn, or your opponent is going to go into the Dark Riders. You're not going to care. You're going to have a counter charge with the Dread Knights the next turn. So it becomes a highly aggressive army, and that is quite interesting. So then I would put in 2 units of Dark Riders, a big block of Dread Legionnaires with a banner of Relentless Company, so that they get there before turn 2, just in order to be able to charge in turn 2. You have the Cauldron to either maximize your charges or to just keep Death Trance, depending on the matchup. Like if you face a gun line, then you probably don't need the Death Trance anymore. And you have the unit of Corsairs with the Vanguard to just ramp up your mobility even more. I think you could do away with the Dreadlord though, with the Dread Prince that is just kitted out for monster bashing. Because in the end he is more expensive than a monster. But once the monster gets to retaliate, he is not gonna like it probably. Like something like a giant, if you just leave it on, I don't know, 2 wounds, 3 wounds, it's gonna hit you back. It is gonna hit you on 5s. It's gonna wound you on 2s likely. And all you have is an armor save that is gonna be eventually like a 5-up armor save or so. So you're gonna get some wounds. If you don't manage to kill your target on the charge, which is quite likely. I mean, you have 4 attacks. If you call the Vienna, like in this list, then you don't even have Killer Instinct. So you should have Killer Instinct probably. But you hit on 2s, you wound on 2s. There's gonna be some 1s. Then your target might have some regen save, some Aegis save, some whatever save. Yeah, I don't like the Lord on the Pegasus with the Midnight Cloak. Because for ranged purposes, he's just fine, but once you get to charge something, you really need some other stuff to charge in together with him to make it feasible. And then you can also do that with other units, I imagine. Yeah, so the Dread Knights in the meantime they cleared the chariot. Meanwhile, the Dread Knights on the other side they charged in onto the Pharaoh and they had 7 attacks, hitting on 2+, 3+, and they only managed to get like 2 hits. But one of the hits was a wound, I believe. My opponent saved it. He killed a knight, and then I had a charge and a banner, and he had a knight that he killed. So he had a BSB nearby, so nothing happened. This was my first turn charge of the Dread Knights that were gonna wound him on a 2+, and gonna do great. Yeah. Well, I believe I actually did a couple of wounds, and my opponent was really gracious with his Aegis saves. Anyway, we have a counter charge of the Colossus into my BSB. So my BSB by now has done his job quite well. So even though it is a shame, obviously, that he's being deleted by the Colossus, he has done his job, and it's not too much of a loss for my army to not have to not have him anymore. Sorry. Because the Dragon Elf army, it's mostly discipline 8 on the core troops, discipline 9 on the elite troops. So that is quite okay. You don't really need your BSB, or at least not as much as some other armies. Also because you're playing quite aggressively and you're playing a mobility game. So it's mostly the panic checks that you have to be careful of rather than the break test. Yeah, so the Necropolis Guard on the right, they go into my Dread Legionnaires. And then I figured I had the Dread Legionnaires, the other unit of Dread Legionnaires, and a unit of Corsairs to get to deal with these Necropolis Guards. So I thought that it should be enough. But then my Dread Legionnaires underperformed quite badly. So they didn't kill sufficient, basically. Yeah, next turn. My Dreadlord finally does have a charge, and it actually is against the target that he is built to clean up. And Divine Altar just joins in for the fun. Yeah, so my Cold Ones, they are charging into a Scorpion just to advance further up my opponent's lines. And I am boxing in my opponent's Necropolis Guard. So my Dreadlord is there with a Discipline 10. Yeah, so far it seems to be going quite okay. I am not that confident about the grind against my opponent's Pharaoh. Yeah. So the Pharaoh keeps on dishing out his damage. He can heal him. I can't heal my Cold Ones, and he has a counter charge set up. So this is not looking good for my Cold Knights back there. Yeah. But on the other hand, my second unit of Cold Knights is going through a nice avenue of the battlefield. So they are gonna overrun over the Scorpion and threaten the flank of my opponent. So this Scorpion placement by my opponent was actually a mistake, because he allowed me to still choose where I would charge him with my Scorpion. And the way I charged him, I actually had to stop just in front of the impassable terrain. But because I came within an inch of it, however, if you extend my footprint of my units, it doesn't go over the impassable terrain. So I kind of precisely measure out in this way where I will end up with my overrun. I do have the line of sight in his flank of his units, and I do know that I don't go too far so that I'm not out of that his units cannot get out of my arc, basically. Yeah, so the Dreadlord, he manages to clean up the Colossus, and the Pharaoh manages to just grind down some more Dread Knights. Yeah. Oh, and the combat between the Necropolis Guard and the Dread Legionnaires sees my Dread Legionnaires break from combat, and the Corsairs that had Discipline 10, they flee away. So this is another lesson, just not to put your units within 16 inches of other units that might at some point have to take a break test. So the break test was already at like -1 or -2. Even though, yeah, I don't think we should have done a lot of damage to both of us. So my opponent had 2 extra ranks and the banner extra. So that should have been a -3. So it was a Discipline 7 test, more or less. Yeah, so my opponent is shuffling around his units to make sure that my Cold War Knights cannot get the maximum combat capabilities that they could have. Yeah, so in tournament play, this would be the point where, as a defensive player, you go like, okay, I still have a couple of characters in my unit that I can sacrifice. Like, first I have my wizard added, I believe, was not the Hierophant. So you can send that out. Then you have the wizard. The general probably you can just send out, and then the Hierophant, and then by the time that my single unit has been able to just charge all of these and then overrun different places, then the game is over. So that is the downside of investing quite some points into one single unit. And if you have a couple of them and you just break through on several places of your opponent's lines, then it's fine. If you don't, then this can last forever. Yeah, the Necropolis Guard, they charged into the side of my Dread Knights. So I'm just keeping an eye to track how many Dread Knights died. So far it's 3 Dread Knights down, then they get the strike, and then the Pharaoh is going to strike, likely removing more Dread Knights. But it is, yeah, it is quite fascinating how well these Necropolis Guard units perform. Because they're not that expensive, and still with the Stubborn, with the reanimation, that allows you to just get them back quite easily. It is like the capabilities you have for regrowing them are kind of similar to Barrow Guard. And Barrow Guard is a decent unit, even though it's not that great, just because the halberd upgrade, the shield upgrade, and the great weapon upgrade, they're all really expensive upgrades. So you're looking at, I think it's like 3 to 6 points depending on the upgrade per model. So if you want to run a small unit, that's still feasible, but then it doesn't really bring you anything. If you want a big unit, then it becomes not feasible anymore, because the unit's going to cost like 900 points or so. But if you start to compare the Necropolis Guard against the Barrow Guard, then it's really not a good comparison at all. Just because the Barrow Guard, they have 1 attack, a defensive 3. They do have lethal strike, and multiple wounds 2 against standard size models, so characters most notably, which is finicky and fun. But they don't have quite a high offensive that Necropolis Guard end up with paired weapons. They don't ignore parry, they don't have poison, they don't have battle focus. Yeah, it's not really a well balanced kind of comparison. So maybe this is supposed to be one of the strengths of the Undying Dynasties. Anyway, we clip the unit of skeletons with the Dread Knights. So actually, that is the unit with the Banner of Blood, I remember now. So this unit still has quite a lot of attacks. Just there's 3 models in contact. So that's the Wizard, and that's the Champion and the normal Dread Knight. The Champion gets 3 attacks, normal Dread Knight 2 attacks. The support attacks is another 3 attacks. So that's 8 attacks for the knights, and then the wizard has 5 attacks, so that's 13 attacks still, just for 3 models wide. So that is quite impressive. Because they still hit on 2s, they still wound on 2s with a reroll of the 1s. And then the gold ones is just 6 attacks in this case. But, so had I had another file in there, then I would have just crumbled this unit down in one go. But then the only downside for me right now is that I can only reshuffle my lines the next turn. So then I can basically choose which direction I want to go before I have to charge. So we had a little bit of a short discussion about this at the time of the battle. So my opponent wants to reform his unit of skeleton archers, and you can see how it is arranged. So just a little bit back, he had his pharaoh in front of his skeleton archers, and he wanted to do a reform, and then walk away in some kind of way. And I don't really know how he envisioned it. But I thought there was no way for him to just really get out of the way there, just because he has his pharaoh basically just in front of the unit. So he would either have to march that away, or he would not have sufficient space, I would think, to do a reform to go like to 5 wide or so and still keep half an inch from every place. But yeah, if you want to go back to the frame and contemplate about some options, then feel free to do so. Yeah, so what else? We have the combat with the Divine Altar and the Necropolis God. So I tried to just grind him down there with my Divine Altar, and then he kills my altar. That happened quite suddenly. So I went in with like 1 wound on my altar, and then in like 2 rounds of combat, he did another 4 wounds to them. So that was quite unfortunate for me. Yeah. So then, yeah, we had a look at this with the combat with the Necropolis God, and I don't remember actually why I didn't go in there. But there was some reason why. Yeah, I believe, yeah, the Pegasus, he would have gone into the flank of the unit, so the Lord, and then he would not have had an overrun into the Scout and Archers. And then, yeah, I first I put the Medusa into this unit, and then we were looking at it, both of us, and I was like, yeah, this is not gonna work, is it? There are just 2 models left, so I could probably kill the Necropolis Guard guy. But then again, the Necropolis Guard, I have half the points now, so that's like 100 points max. So actually throwing in the Medusa gives my opponent more points than me, because there's still this character with the Scourge of Kings and the 7 attacks with poison and lethal strike and battle focus and all the stuff. So yeah, actually it was not worth it to throw in the Medusa there. And then we go into the combat with the Skeleton Archers, and I basically just evaporate them in 1 turn. So my opponent still tried to mitigate the damage by having some characters in there. In a tournament game, that would have been a bad choice, and it would have been better to just send out your characters and have your opponent take less points from you, basically. But by this time, my Pegasus Lord is just down to 1 wound. And that's another reason why I don't like this model. Every single wound is worth 200 points. That is, and you can't get the wounds back. You can't do anything about it. You only have a 3+ Aegis against ranged. Whilst that might seem awesome, and it is definitely really good, I would still shoot at it with a cannon, and like once per 3 times you fail. So if it's the first turn that you fail, then yeah, your Pegasus is gone. It's like, yeah, yeah, it's really freaky. It's a really vulnerable model in some ways, and for 600 points, I would rather have even just a third unit of Colton Knights. I mean, it's a full unit. You're not gonna do a cannon is not gonna do anything against that. Yeah. So this is the state of the board at this point of the battle. I form up really wide just to be able to get my opponent wherever he goes, and the wizard is all the way on the bottom. So if my opponent wants to just walk a little bit away from my unit or make it inconvenient for me to charge, I do have my Pegasus that can watch over my unit. I do have my Medusa that can zone there. I really want that wizard. So my opponent still has this big block of Necropolis Guard all the way on the right, on the hill. I still have my Corsairs that have rallied by now near the building. And we have this little corner in the bottom left, and the rest is all dead. So my skeleton, or my opponent's skeleton's catapult is still growing strong also. Still try to knock out my Pegasus Lord, but I believe he missed this time. Then we go into combat. So my opponent did have some extra wounds from being able to heal the unit through magic, but then the Cold War Knights, they made quick work out of the Necropolis Guard. And basically in the last turn, my wizard charged out of the unit to charge the wizard of my opponent and kill him. So the moral victory goes to the skeleton catapult, who survived the game. Yeah, and will still shoot down a lot of stuff in the years to come. I hope you like this one, and I'll see you the next time.